Hey guys, and welcome to a new episode of the Know Your Formula One track series. This week is the Hungarian Grand Prix and we're heading to the Hungaroring, situated 11 miles from Budapest. The first Grand Prix at this venue was in 1986 and it has been on the calendar every single year since then. It should remain on the calendar until at least 2032. The Hungaroring is a 4.38 kilometers long track and it has 14 corners. If last year we had 2 DRS zones, it looks like this year it's going to be only one. One of the key characteristics about this track is its lack of long straights. The only one is a front straight and it was actually extended by 200 meters back in 2003, making it 908 meters long. The first corner at the end of the straight was also reprofiled in order to increase passing opportunities. However, the Hungaroring is a very tight and twisty track, making it very difficult for drivers to overtake. When it comes to lap time, it is Lewis Hamilton that holds the record for the fastest lap in a race with a 1:16.627, and it was in 2020. Hamilton also has the fastest qualifying lap and is the most successful driver around this track. He has 9 pole positions and 8 wins in Hungary. By the way, I'll be making these videos for every single race on the calendar this year, so if you don't want to miss any, make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell button. We start the lap on the only decently long straight and the circuit's one and only DRS zone. Turn 1 is a slow hairpin that slightly drops away after entry, making it easy to lock up. Drivers will still have DRS down this next short straight before getting on the brakes for turn 2, a long left-hand loop that also drops in elevation as you drive through it. Turn 3 is easy flat and drivers will immediately begin to prepare for the blind and extremely fast turn 4 kink, which sits atop a crest. Car positioning at the exit is crucial here to set up the right line into turn 5. This naturally aligns the car to be ready for braking into the turn 6 and 7 chicane. Now begins the twistiest and most exhilarating part of the track. Keeping the exit of turn 8 tight to the left will open up the entry into 9. Turn 10 is also easy flat, but it's turn 11 that feels amazing when you nail it, usually requiring only a small lift and a downshift. Around where the curb begins on the left is the braking marker for turn 12, and you can carry more speed than you think through here. The final 2 corners are all about maximizing traction, and we've seen drivers take different lines through these turns in years past. In both cases, it's easy to lose the rear if you get on the throttle too early. Before you know it, we're back on the front straight to start another lap of the tight and twisty Hungaroring. Now let's move on to a few fun facts. And the first one is that this track is often referred as a Monaco without the walls. It is even sometimes compared to a go-karting track. It is in fact the second slowest track on the calendar this year after Monaco. This is why teams will usually go with a high downforce setup and the drivers will try to find a good rhythm to optimize speed on this tricky circuit. Another fun fact is that it is one of the tracks that has been built the fastest. It took less than 9 months from start to finish, and the first race happened on the same year as the track was built. The original layout for this circuit was actually modified during construction when they realized that there was a spring underground. And that takes me to the next fun fact. Because we have a slow lap and because passing opportunities are rare around this track, it can lead to fairly boring races. However, the Hungarian Grand Prix often holds its fair share of surprises. And in fact, it is pretty rare to see a championship contender win in Hungary. If we look at all 38 races that happened at the Hungarian Grand Prix, only 30% of them were won by the same driver that won the championship on the same year. And it was at some point considered a curse when between 2005 and 2017, none of the drivers who won the Hungarian Grand Prix ended up winning the championship. Another thing to know is that the Hungarian Grand Prix usually happens during the summer in Europe, and despite a weather that can change pretty quickly, we have seen rain in only 3 races in Hungary in 2006, 2011 and 2014. There have been occasions where rain happened right before or right after the race, but only 3 times during the race. And that's what's taking me to the next section of this video, the memorable moments. Those were the conditions for the race in 2006. It was a wet, dry type of weather, the conditions were changing on the track, and Button did an amazing race, started 14th on the grid but was able to work his way up, passing cars after cars. Towards the end of the race, Alonso was leading but ended up losing a wheel nut and spinning out on track. That gave the opportunity for Button to pass him and win the race. In 2009, a very scary incident happened during qualifying involving Felipe Massa. Massa was knocked unconscious and crashed into the barriers, having suffered a skull fracture.
Actually, I just finished my lap in the qualifying. I was in the in-lap, coming back to the garage. Another car was in front of me. They just lost the spring, and the spring just falls away from the car. It was jumping on the asphalt. It came straight to my head. It was like a big impact.
He underwent surgery to his left eye area after being airlifted to the hospital. He recovered quickly, being discharged from the hospital 1 week later. He would miss the rest of the season, but he made his return in 2010. Following the incident, the FIA immediately went to work in implementing new safety standards for helmets, focusing on strengthening the visor area, which was 10 times weaker than the rest of the helmet.
And this visor, it was like a big evolution that they made after my accident.
This area now is very, very strong. This is a Xylon carbon panel. And then with the new helmet, you can now see that the visor aperture here is exactly matched with the opening we have here. And all of the reinforcement in this panel has now been integrated into the front of the helmet shell here.
In 2014, there was a heavy rain downpour right before the race. It created some very tricky conditions for the drivers, creating opportunities depending on the strategy. After two safety cars being very opportunistic, Ricciardo was able to pass both Hamilton's Mercedes and Alonso's Ferrari in the last 4 laps of the race. He ended up taking the win in Hungary.
Definitely as good as the first. Yeah, when I crossed the line, I knew what was going down, and I let out a lot of emotion.
Now, more recently, in 2021, we saw a very chaotic race in Hungary. The track was dumped at the beginning of the race, and that led to a crash on the first lap and a red flag. During the formation lap before the race restart, teams realized the track was too dry for inters, and all drivers except Hamilton decided to pit again for slicks. This made for a very unusual sight in Formula 1, with Hamilton being the only car on the grid while all other drivers restarted the race from the pit lane. These conditions and the strategy played well for Ocon, who took his first ever win in Formula 1 that year. Now, last year in 2023, we saw Max Verstappen take the win with half a minute advance on Lando Norris. Checo took third place on the podium, and Max Verstappen took the extra point for the fastest lap of the race. But now that you know everything there is to know about this track, let me jump into the sim and start off drive and talk session.
Hey guys, and welcome to the Hungaroring. It is definitely one of the trickiest tracks on the calendar this year. It is small and twisty. It definitely requires a lot of concentration from the drivers. Can't make a mistake here. There's really no time to breathe on this lap. You have to be on it 100% of the time. And obviously, due to the nature of the track, as I mentioned earlier, it is very difficult to pass on this track. So in terms of the strategy, drivers will make sure that they qualify as good as they can and try to conserve track position, because they know that it will be very difficult for them to pass. And when it comes to strategy, as I mentioned, it is a high downforce here, and it used to be actually a one-stop race pretty much all the time, but recently the tires have been slightly different, slightly softer, and the teams realized that they prefer to use multiple softer tires rather than the hard tires. So we have seen mostly two-stop strategy in the past couple of years on this track, so we'll see for this weekend, but I expect that it's probably going to be the same. When it comes to the weather, it is summer, it is going to be very hot. It's going to be probably one of the hottest races of the season for the drivers, so it's going to be difficult. We're expecting temperature of 36 Celsius, which is like 96 Fahrenheit. Is insanely hot, and you can imagine already a very demanding track, and with those conditions, it's going to be a tough one for the drivers. And from the weather forecast, it doesn't look like we are up for any rain this weekend. Now let's talk about the recent news in Formula 1, and the first one that I want to mention is Ocon, that announced his contract with Haas for next year. He is going to join Behrman. A lot of people were actually feeling sad for Behrman. I don't know what you guys think. Ocon is not really a team player. I think we've all seen that at Alpine. We'll see how it goes, but it's it's going to be an interesting new lineup for Haas, I think. Now, another news is about Perez's contract with Red Bull. It was announced that he basically extended his contract for another 2 years, but we've now learned that there is a clause to this contract that was added, or at least that we didn't know about, which basically says that Perez has to be within 100 points of Max Verstappen by the middle of the year if he wants to be sure to keep his seat. As it stands, Perez is 6th with 118 points, while Max is obviously first and has 255 points, which means with 2 races to go before the summer break, it's not a very comfortable position for Perez to be in, honestly. The last thing that I want to mention is about Newey. I think it was 2 days ago, basically that he doesn't want to be rushed into making a decision about his future in Formula 1, and basically saying that he hasn't made a decision, kind of answering the rumors that he would already decided to go to Ferrari. It seems that currently he might be more likely to go to Aston Martin than to Ferrari. But now let's talk a little bit about the last race, the British Grand Prix, because it was an incredible race. So much happened. Obviously it was tricky conditions. We had some rain throughout the race, making obviously the strategy really important. The pit stops, the choice of the tires, which obviously made for a very fun and entertaining race. It was very unfortunate for George Russell, who was on pole position, to have to retire from this race. It obviously meant so much to him. It was really sad for him, but I have to say, I think everyone was really happy to see Hamilton take the win. The McLarens were doing really good on this race. They were both faster than Max, especially at the beginning of the race. It was really unfortunate for Piastri when McLaren decided to keep him out in the rain with the slick tires when everyone else was pitting to go on inters. He was struggling so much that basically Lando Norris had time to do his pit stop and was already catching up Piastri by the end of the lap before Piastri had pitted. And that was a huge mistake, having from McLaren, a bad strategy. They didn't want to risk stacking them up because they thought they would lose time. It would definitely have been better than what they did to Piastri. That was pretty awful and very painful to watch. I felt so bad for him. I think he was second in the race at that moment, and he ended up like 6th or something like that. However, Lando did really good as well, and he could have been second on the podium. But at the end of the race, the Red Bull had a better strategy with the tires. They decided to go on the hard compound tires instead of going for the soft, and it was actually much faster. So Max was able to catch him up at the last minute, I think 4 laps before the end, and he was on his way to catching Hamilton too. Yeah, definitely an amazing race. I'm curious to hear what you guys thought about it. Were you happy with the result? Make sure to let me know in the comments below. But for now, I think it's time we move on to prediction time.
Alright guys, it is prediction time, and this week I'm going to be a little bit optimistic and hope that the Ferraris do better than they've been doing in the past few races. It is a high downforce circuit, so I'm hoping that they're going to do good, just like they did in Monaco. So I'm going to take a leap of faith and put Charles Leclerc in first position, I'm going to put Max in second, and George Russell in third. But don't forget to let me know what your predictions are in the comments below, and give this video a like if you enjoy watching. But until then, I'll see you in the next one.